My online boyfriend is a bit of a weirdo. He constantly sends me pictures of his pet snake, always asking me if I think the little guy is handsome. I honestly am not a huge fan of reptiles. But my virtual boyfriend is a god at video games. And is incredibly generous with his wallet. So, I routinely swallow my conscience and shower the reptile with praise. Absolutely gorgeous. That is literally the most handsome snake I have ever seen in my entire life. He would always text back, "Does my baby like him?" I would reply in seconds, "I love him so much." Fully satisfied. The man on the other end of the screen would casually wire me $5,000. Eventually, I wanted to meet up in real life. But when I arrived at our agreed location, the only thing waiting for me was that little black snake. It was incredibly easy to recognize the little black snake. After all, Asher sent me pictures of him every single day. This is his front, this is his back. I practically had the reptile's anatomy memorized. So even though the little black snake had been meticulously groomed, today, wearing a miniature top hat and a tiny silk bow tie, I recognized him instantly. The strange part was that Asher was nowhere to be found. Maybe he just stepped out to take a call. Or grab something from a store. I thought about standing a bit further away to wait. But the moment the little snake locked his emerald green slit pupils on me, his eyes lit up with an unnatural brightness. He genuinely seemed thrilled to see me. I was still a little creeped out. But then I remembered this was the beloved pet of my stupidly rich, overly generous internet boyfriend. I had to put on the performance of a lifetime. Bracing myself, I sat down next to him. The light in the little snake's eyes grew even brighter, following the urge to scream. I put on my best gentle, maternal smile. I even reached out and lightly teased his chin. "You are so cute." The little snake actually seemed to understand me. A faint rosy flush miraculously appeared on his dark, scaly face. Testing the waters, I added, "You look even better in person than in your photos." The snake was over the moon. He even lifted his tail tip to wave at me, fighting down my primal human fear of cold-blooded creatures. I did my absolute best to interact with the little guy. I was determined to make sure that when Asher finally came back, he would see me radiating pure maternal love. And then hopefully he would wire me another $5,000. But I kept up the act from noon until nightfall, sitting in that high-end luxury restaurant. I drank 3 artisan lemonades, ate a plate of truffle pasta, 2 salads and 3 different cuts of steak. I texted Asher 10 different times. No reply. No Asher. It wasn't until midnight that the waiter finally approached my table. "Miss Sophie, we are preparing to close for the night." Was this Asher playing some kind of sick joke on me? Feeling utterly humiliated, I reached for my purse to pay the massive bill. The waiter just smiled warmly and shook his head. The future boss's wife never has to pay for her meals. Staff even brought out a mountain of beautifully wrapped gift bags that Asher had prepared for me in advance. It suddenly clicked. Asher didn't show up because this was a test. Billionaires love doing this kind of thing. He wanted to observe me from the shadows, to see if I was emotionally stable, if I had good manners, and if I possessed a genuinely loving heart. Normally, I possess none of those things. But remembering the sheer size of Asher's bank account, I was suddenly overflowing with the noblest virtues known to mankind. If this was a test, I was going to pass it with flying colors. So when I gathered my things to leave, I absolutely refused to leave the snake behind. Stealing my nerves, I scooped the little guy up, tucked him against my chest and carried him all the way home. "You can do this, Sophie. You are going to secure the bag." The little snake probably wasn't used to human body heat. Tucked against my chest, he got totally dizzy and looked a bit out of it. I scrambled to find a clean cardboard box and gently placed him inside. He finally snapped out of his daze. But for some reason he looked completely crestfallen. I couldn't let his beloved pet die on my watch. I immediately went online, hunted down the contact info for a premium exotic pet store owner. I paid an absolute premium to have a luxury, temperature-controlled terrarium delivered and set up in my apartment. That very night, I carefully placed the little snake inside. Looking at him, a funny thought crossed my mind. He looked exactly like a billionaire CEO, waking up in his 1,000-square-foot California king bed. I snapped a picture and sent it to my Mia boyfriend. Still no response. Considering he had already spent roughly $500,000 on me over the course of our relationship, I decided to be patient. I went to take a shower. The moment he saw my bare shoulders and legs, he frantically turned his little head away, visibly flustered. Oh, my. What a perfect gentleman of a reptile. Now let me see if you are a boy or a girl. It felt a little intrusive, but curiosity got the better of me. Ignoring the snake's frantic squirming, I gently but firmly held him down and inspected his underside. Wow, he was a male and a surprisingly well-endowed one at that. I couldn't help but let out a cheeky wolf whistle. The little snake struggled so hard. His top hat popped off and his bow tie went crooked. He finally scrambled into the far corner of the tank, staring at me with a look of absolute violated betrayal. I cooed at him, offered a few words of comfort and happily went to bed. Of course, I didn't actually go to sleep. You have to stay up late to truly appreciate the value of your free time. Around 2 in the morning, my phone finally buzzed with a message from Asher. Baby, I honestly never expected you to be so passionate and bold. I knew it. My brilliant performance at the restaurant paid off. I happily texted back, do you like it? The chat went completely silent. I started overthinking. Did he see how much food I inhaled? Was he judging me? Did you think I ate too much? I typed the words out, then quickly deleted them. Never incriminate yourself. Make him bring it up first. If he mentioned it, I would just lie and say I starved myself for 3 days, so I could fit into my prettiest dress for our date. But then Asher's reply finally came through. I love it. So are you satisfied? Of course I was satisfied. Asher had showered me with designer jewelry, luxury bags and endless attention. I was living the absolute dream. I thought exactly that. So I said exactly that. Asher sent back a blushing emoji. Then he typed, baby. You are so honest. I love you so much. I promise I will make you the happiest woman in the world. Right on cue, a notification popped up. A $5,000 transfer with the note. Voluntary gift. Just another casual day making $5,000. From my couch, I punched the air under my blankets. Absolutely thrilled. This was amazing. The money I had saved up from him was already enough to buy a Porsche Cayenne and put a down payment on a luxury penthouse. Asher sent another photo of the snake. We made it home. In the picture, the little snake was wearing his hat and bow tie, quilled up perfectly on a velvet cushion. The background was Asher's staggering modern glass mansion. Wait a minute, the snake was just here. I threw off the covers and ran to the living room. The terrarium was empty. The little escape artist had actually broken out. He snuck out and managed to navigate his way back to a billionaire's mansion. All by himself. What an absolute genius of a pet. I happily texted Asher back. Baby, this photo is stunning. Out of all the pictures you've ever sent me, this is the most handsome he has ever looked. Asher was delighted. I always trust my baby's taste. A second later, that exact photo became Asher's profile picture. He even sent me a second cash transfer for the night. Alright, to $10,000 for the day. I happily accepted the money and typed. I can't wait for our next date. After all, one date with this man earned me more than half a year's salary. After days of relentless begging on my end, Asher finally agreed to a second date. I went all out. I wore my most elegant figure-hugging dress. Colored contacts, expensive false lashes. Flawless contouring. I showed up to the cafe looking like a supermodel. But sitting at our reserved table, all I found was his pet snake. His outfit was even more elaborate. This time the little guy was wearing a custom-tailored miniature suit jacket and balancing a tiny pair of gold-rimmed glasses on his snout. Was he cosplaying as a bespectacled intellectual? No, wait. That wasn't the point. Where the hell was Asher? I finally realized something was deeply wrong. Was he really standing me up again? Just as the frustration began to boil over, I felt a soft pressure against my palm. I looked down and saw the very tip of the snake's tail tied neatly. Around the tail was a beautiful little ribbon tied into a perfect bow. He looked exactly like a meticulously wrapped gift. Impossible to reject. The little snake looked up at me with eyes full of pure, unadulterated sincerity. The moment I smiled, the entire snake slithered happily into my open hands. Oh, you sweet little thing. I finally understood Asher wasn't just looking for a girlfriend. He was looking for a stepmother for his precious pet. I had a great personality. And I had proven my high tolerance for reptiles. So Asher chose me. He didn't show up because he wanted the snake to personally vet me. He was letting his pet choose his new mom. Asher really loved this animal. Well, if my job was to pamper the snake, I was going to be the best snake mom in the world. I dutifully straightened his tiny suit jacket, then carried him around the city. We walked through the botanical gardens and even caught a movie. I wanted to make conversation. But then I realized Asher had never actually told me the snake's name. Without a name, I decided to just call him Baby. Baby, do you like this park? The little snake nodded. Baby, do you want to go look at the pond? He nodded again, perfectly obedient. Baby, do you want to come home with me? The snake hesitated, but the hesitation lasted exactly 3 seconds. Before he started nodding so hard, his glasses nearly flew off. Winning over the pet was basically winning over the billionaire. I was floating on cloud 9. I leaned down and pressed a kiss to the top of his scaly head. The little snake blushed a deep crimson and buried his face into my chest, making soft, happy little squeaks. Honestly, putting Asher's massive bank account aside for a moment, this little snake was incredibly cute. Surprisingly handsome, wildly intelligent, and never tried to bite me. Spending the rest of my life taking care of him with Asher didn't sound like a bad deal. At all. 5. The snake rested perfectly still in my arms as I carried him back to my apartment. My phone remained completely silent. Asher was probably tied up with corporate billionaire stuff. So I sat on the couch with a snake and watched sports highlights until late. When it was over, I tucked him back into his luxury terrarium. Middle of the night. I was deep in sleep when a soft rustling sound near my ear woke me up. I groggily opened my eyes. A little snake had somehow crawled under my duvet and was sleeping soundly, curled up right against my chest, with a look of absolute bliss. I gently poked him, his tail tip wrapped securely around my finger, like a child begging for affection. But as a responsible pet owner, I had to be safe. I grabbed my phone and searched online. Is it safe to sleep in the same bed as a pet snake? The internet firmly replied, absolutely. Never sleep in the same bed as a snake. I had to ignore his pleading watery eyes. I picked him up by the middle and carried him back to the glass tank. He tried to wrap himself around my wrist, refusing to let go, but I gently detached him. Good babies have to learn how to sleep in their own beds. The morning sun filtered through the sheer curtains of my apartment, casting a warm glow over the pristine, state-of-the-art terrarium. I rolled out of bed, rubbed the sleep from my eyes, and padded over to the living room to check on my golden ticket. The little black snake, whom I had officially dubbed Baby, in the absence of any real name from Asher, was coiled tightly in the furthest corner of the glass tank. His miniature top hat lay discarded on the imported coconut fiber substrate. His tiny silk bow tie was completely askew. He had buried his snout beneath his coils, presenting me with nothing but a sleek, dark, and utterly silent back. Baby? I cooed, tapping gently on the glass. Good morning, handsome. Look at you, sleeping like a little prince. Usually, the moment he heard my voice, his emerald-slit pupils would snap open and light up with that bizarre, hyper-intelligent glow. Today, however, he didn't even twitch. Great, I thought, a cold sweat breaking out on my neck. I broke the billionaire's snake. I remembered the frantic way he had clung to my wrist the night before, his tail wrapped desperately around my finger like a toddler being abandoned at preschool. I had ruthlessly detached him and put him back in his cage because Google told me that sleeping with snakes was a one-way ticket to becoming an oversized python's midnight snack. Granted, Baby was barely the length of a ruler and about as thick as a highlighter, but a girl couldn't be too careful. What if he possessed some sort of supernatural growth spurt? Determined to restore my standing as the world's most loving future stepmother, I decided to try bribery. During my midnight panic buy at the premium exotic pet store, the clerk had convinced me to purchase a box of gourmet, ethically sourced, pre-killed frozen pinky mice. I had nearly gagged just looking at the box, but for the sake of 5 grand transfers, I was willing to do almost anything. Using a pair of extra-long silver feeding tongs, I carefully hoisted a defrosted pinky mouse and dangled it near Baby's corner. Breakfast is served, my little king. I sang out, trying to mask the sheer revulsion in my voice. Look at this delicious, plump thing. The snake slowly uncoiled His emerald green eyes locked onto the dangling rodent. For a fraction of a second, I expected him to strike with wild, reptilian instinct. Instead, the little black snake's expression morphed into one of absolute, unadulterated horror. He recoiled so violently he practically slammed into the glass wall behind him. He looked at the dead mouse, then looked up at me, his eyes wide with a mixture of deep offense and profound disgust. If a snake could gag, Baby was definitely gagging. He swept his tail out and aggressively batted at the air, as if telling me to get that repulsive thing out of his sight. What? You don't like it? I blinked. But you're a snake. This is literally your target demographic. He turned his head away, resting his chin on his coils with a heavy, dramatic sigh. He looked exactly like a petulant French aristocrat being offered a slice of processed American cheese. Before I could ponder the bizarrely high standards of this reptile, my phone on the kitchen counter buzzed. I dropped the tongs, shuddering as the mouse landed back in its box, and lunged for my device. Asher, I hear someone didn't want to cuddle last night. My heart stopped. I slowly turned my head toward the terrarium. Then, I slowly turned my head to look around my living room. Is there a camera in here? I began scanning the ceiling, the smoke detector, the light fixtures, and even the tiny artificial plastic plants inside the terrarium. Billionaires were notorious paranoids. Had Asher hidden a camera in the temperature-controlled tank he had delivered to my apartment? Was he watching my every move? Had he watched me do my nightly skincare routine while singing off-key to early 2000s pop music? My fingers flew across the keyboard, trembling slightly. Sophie, Asher, how did you know that? Do you have cameras in my apartment? Flushed face. There was an agonizing 3-minute pause. I could feel my pulse racing. If he was spying on me, I had to pretend I loved being watched. Yes, corporate espionage is my love language. Asher, no cameras, baby. I told you, my pet and I share a very special bond. He has a way of letting me know when he's feeling rejected. He was very sad. He said you threw him out of bed because you thought he was trying to measure you. I let out a breath I didn't know I was holding, though the special bond explanation sounded suspiciously like rich people woo-woo. Still, it was better than a hidden camera. Sophie, I was just worried. I read online that snakes lie next to humans to measure them so they can swallow them whole. I couldn't bear the thought of him hurting himself trying to eat me. I did it out of pure, maternal love. Asher, Sophie, he is 30 centimeters long. He weighs less than a pound. How exactly is he going to swallow a grown woman? My face flushed. Okay, when he put it that way, it did sound incredibly stupid. Sophie, you can never be too safe. What if he grew overnight? What if he's a magical snake? Asher, he is very offended. He's currently pouting in the corner of his tank, refusing to even look at his velvet cushion. You need to make it up to him. Sophie, how? I tried feeding him a premium organic Pinky Mouse, but he looked at me like I was trying to poison him. Asher, he doesn't eat mice. He has a highly refined palate. Try ordering some fresh, high-grade Wagyu beef sashimis, lightly seared, no salt. And perhaps some mineral water. I stared at my phone screen in utter disbelief. Wagyu beef? For a snake? This reptile ate better than 99% of the human population. I was currently eating instant oatmeal, and this little slithering gold mine was demanding seared Wagyu. Sophie, of course. Only the best for our baby. I'll order it right away. Before I could even close the app, a familiar, beautiful notification popped up at the top of my screen. Bank transfer, $10,000 from Asher. Note, Wagyu fund. $10,000. For snake food. I gripped my phone so hard I thought the glass might crack. I love reptiles, I whispered aloud to the empty room, tears of absolute capitalistic joy welling in my eyes. I love them so much. Snakes are the backbone of the ecosystem. I am a changed woman. I spun around and marched back to the terrarium. Baby was still pretending to be asleep, but I knew he was listening. All right, my little culinary critic, I said, leaning against the glass with a Dazzling, affectionate smile. Wagyu sashimi it is. And since your daddy was so generous, I'm going to personally hand feed you. How does that sound? The snake's tail tip gave a tiny, involuntary twitch. He didn't turn around, but I could tell his stubborn resolve was already starting to crumble. By afternoon, the Wagyu beef had arrived, delivered by a specialized courier from a 3-Michelin-starred Japanese restaurant. I carefully seared the edges of the marbled beef exactly as Asher had instructed, letting it cool to room temperature. When I presented the small, exquisite plate to baby, he didn't hesitate. He slithered out of his corner with an air of immense dignity, sniffed the beef, and began to delicately tear off small pieces. Watching a snake eat Wagyu beef with the elegance of a Victorian nobleman was easily the most surreal experience of my life, but I cheered him on like a proud soccer mom. Yes. Look at you go. Such a civilized boy. I clapped. Once he was full, he slithered onto my hand, his scales cool but surprisingly smooth. He didn't feel slimy at all. In fact, he felt like polished obsidian. He wrapped himself around my wrist like an expensive, living bracelet, resting his chin on the back of my hand. My phone buzzed again. Asher, I'm glad he's feeling better. I think it's time we had our second date. Tonight. 8 p.m. My heart leapt. Finally. A second date. I was going to see the elusive billionaire in the flesh. Asher, wear something beautiful. I've sent a package to your door. And please, bring our baby. He wants to see you in your finest. Sophie, I can't wait, my love. I'll be there. And I'll make sure our baby looks absolutely dashing. 10 minutes later, there was a knock at my door. A courier in a crisp white suit delivered a large, glossy black box with a silk ribbon. Inside was a breathtaking, emerald green silk slip dress that looked like it had been spun from starlight, along with a matching pair of diamond teardrop earrings. But that wasn't all. At the bottom of the box was a smaller, velvet-lined container. Inside was a custom-tailored, miniature black tuxedo jacket, complete with tiny satin lapels, a microscopic white collar, and a pair of gold-rimmed wire spectacles designed to rest perfectly on a snake's snout. I stared at the tiny suit, then at the snake, who was currently peering over the edge of the box with an air of immense curiosity. Are you kidding me? I whispered, bursting into a fit of giggles. You have a tuxedo? Asher is absolutely out of his mind. Baby slithered into the box, nudging the tiny tuxedo with his nose. He looked up at me, his green eyes practically pleading. All right, I laughed, picking up the miniature clothing. Let's get you dressed, Mr. Bond. Fitting a snake into a tuxedo was surprisingly easy. The jacket wrapped around his upper body with a gentle, elastic Velcro strip underneath, leaving his lower body free to slither. I carefully balanced the tiny gold-rimmed glasses on his snout. He looked absolutely ridiculous. But also, somehow, incredibly dapper. He looked like a highly distinguished, 10-inch-long professor of serpentine philosophy. He slithered over to the full-length mirror in my hallway, reared up on his tail, and inspected himself from multiple angles, adjusting his posture with a look of supreme satisfaction. You are a total diva, I told him, shaking my head as I went to get ready myself. I spent the next 2 hours doing my makeup to absolute perfection. I slipped into the emerald silk dress, which clung to my curves in all the right places, and put on the diamond earrings. When I walked out of the bathroom, baby was waiting by the door, coiled neatly on a velvet clutch bag. When he saw me, his emerald eyes dilated so wide they looked almost entirely green. He let out a soft, high-pitched squeak, a sound I didn't even know snakes could make, and his scaly face flushed a distinct shade of rosy pink. Do you like it? I asked, spinning around. He nodded his head vigorously, his tiny glasses wobbling but staying firmly in place. Good, I smirked, picking up the clutch and letting him drape himself over my forearm. Let's go secure our future, baby. The address Asher provided was a private, rooftop glass pavilion perched atop one of the city's most exclusive luxury hotels. The elevator ride up was silent, save for the quiet rustle of baby's tiny tuxedo against my silk dress. When the elevator doors chimed and slid open, I stepped out into a breathtaking oasis. The pavilion was surrounded by lush, exotic flora, with floor-to-ceiling glass walls offering a panoramic, 360-degree view of the sparkling city skyline below. The space was lit entirely by soft, flickering candlelight and string lights that looked like captured fireflies. A single table was set in the center of the pavilion. It featured exquisite fine china, crystal glasses, and a massive bouquet of dark red roses. But the restaurant was entirely empty. There were no other guests, no musicians. Not even a host at the door. "Hello?" I called out, my voice echoing slightly in the vast, elegant space. No one answered. I walked over to the table. There were 2 human-sized chairs, but on the table itself, right next to one of the place settings, was a miniature velvet stool. Next to the stool sat a tiny, silver doll-sized goblet and a microscopic plate. "Well," I muttered, placing baby onto his custom velvet stool. "At least your father is consistent with his theme." Baby adjusted his tiny glasses with his tail tip and settled onto his stool with practiced ease, looking around the empty pavilion with a calm, familiar air. Just then, a waiter in a pristine white tuxedo stepped out from the shadows. He bowed deeply to me, then turned and bowed just as deeply to the snake. "Welcome, Miss Sophie." "Welcome, young master," the waiter said smoothly. "Young master?" I choked back a laugh. The staff here was definitely getting paid a fortune to keep a straight face. "Is Asher running late?" I asked, smoothing down my silk dress as I sat in the chair opposite baby's stool. "The master will be joining you shortly," the waiter replied politely. In the meantime, he requested that we begin the service. "Would you care for some wine?" "Yes, please. I need something to steady my nerves," I admitted. The waiter produced a dusty, incredibly rare bottle of Romanée-Conti. He poured a generous glass for me, then, with absolute seriousness, lifted a tiny glass dropper. He carefully drew a single, perfect drop of the priceless red wine and let it fall into baby's microscopic silver goblet. I watched, utterly spellbound, as the little black snake leaned forward, dipped his snout into the goblet, and took a delicate sip. He smacked his tiny jaws together, looking thoroughly pleased with the vintage. "Unbelievable," I whispered, taking a long sip of my own wine. "He really is a little gentleman, isn't he?" The waiter smiled warmly. "He has excellent taste, Miss Sophie. Just like his father." With another bow, the waiter disappeared back into the shadows, leaving us alone. Once more. The minutes ticked by. I drank my wine, looking at the city lights. I checked my phone. No texts from Asher. I looked across the table at baby. He was watching me intently, his green eyes shimmering in the candlelight. The tiny gold-rimmed glasses made him look so earnest, so incredibly sincere. "Hey, baby," I murmured, resting my chin on my hand. "Is your dad always this mysterious? Or is he just really, really shy?" The snake tilted his head, his slit pupils softening. He slithered off his velvet stool, making his way across the crisp white tablecloth. He stopped right in front of my hand, which was resting on the table. With a slow, deliberate movement, he lifted his tail. Tied neatly around the very tip of his tail was a beautiful, tiny white silk ribbon, fashioned into a perfect bow. He looked like a meticulously wrapped gift, presented just for me. My heart melted. Despite my initial fear of reptiles, I couldn't deny it anymore. This little guy was absolute perfection. "You are too sweet," I whispered, reaching out to gently stroke the top of his head, right between his tiny glasses. Baby closed his eyes, leaning into my touch. A soft, happy little squeak escaped him, and the rosy flush returned to his scaly cheeks. "If Asher doesn't show up," I said softly, "I think I'd be perfectly happy just being your mom. You're much better company than most of the guys I've dated. Anyway." Suddenly, a soft, warm breeze swept through the pavilion, rustling the leaves of the surrounding plants. The candles flickered, their flames dancing wildly. Before settling, a strange, electric hum filled the air. Baby pulled back from my hand. He slithered to the center of the table, standing tall on his tail. His emerald green eyes began to glow with an unnatural, brilliant intensity, far brighter than I had ever seen before. "Baby?" I asked, a sudden wave of apprehension washing over me. "What's going on?" An emerald green aura, soft and shimmering like the northern lights, began to emanate from his scales. The light grew, expanding outward, wrapping around his tiny form in a swirling vortex of gentle, warm energy. I gasped, pushing my chair back as the light intensified, illuminating the entire glass pavilion in brilliant green. The silhouette within the light began to shift. It was no longer a 10-inch snake. The shadow grew taller, wider, its form elongating and morphing with breathtaking speed. The tiny tuxedo jacket and microscopic glasses dissolved into the glowing mist, replaced by the sharp, broad lines of a human silhouette. My brain completely short-circuited. I couldn't move. I couldn't breathe. The green light gradually began to fade, sparkling down like falling stars onto the wooden floor. Sitting in the chair opposite me, the chair that had been empty just seconds ago, was a man. I stared. And stared. And stared some more. He was, without a doubt, the most breathtakingly handsome man I had ever laid eyes on. He looked to be in his late 20s, with sharp, aristocratic features, a perfectly chiseled jawline, and messy, ink-black hair that fell effortlessly across his forehead. He was tall, with broad shoulders clad in a flawless, custom-tailored black human-sized tuxedo. But it was his eyes that gave him away. They were a striking, mesmerizing emerald green. And as he looked at me, his pupils briefly narrowed into vertical, reptilian slits before softening back into human circles. Furthermore, his silk bow tie was slightly crooked, and a very distinct, very human rosy flush was spreading across his cheeks and reaching the tips of his ears. My fork, which I hadn't realized I was holding, slipped from my fingers and clattered onto the fine china plate with a deafening clang. The man leaned forward, resting his elbows on the table and intertwining his long, elegant fingers. He looked at me with a mixture of sheer amusement, deep adoration, and an unmistakable touch of nervous embarrassment. "So," he said. His voice was a deep, velvety, rich purr that sent a sudden electric shiver straight down my spine. "Am I still the most handsome snake you've ever seen in your entire life?" My mouth opened, but no sound came out. My mind was currently operating like a computer trying to run a heavy software program with zero RAM. Images and memories began flashing through my head at light speed, hitting me like a succession of physical blows. The photos sent every day. This is his front, this is his back. The way he got flustered and turned his head away when I stepped out of the shower. The way he violently resisted when I held him down to check his gender. My voice echoing. In my own memory, wow, he is a male and a surprisingly well-endowed one at that. The wolf whistle. "Oh my God," I whispered, the realization hitting me with the force of a tidal wave. My face instantly turned a shade of red that rivaled the roses on the table. I felt so hot I thought my hair might catch fire. I wanted the glass floor beneath me to shatter and drop me 50 stories down into the pavement. I wanted to dissolve into a puddle of absolute shame. "You," I choked out, my voice cracking. "You were the snake. The snake is you." "At your service," Asher said, offering a small, sheepish bow of his head. He cleared his throat, rubbing the back of his neck as his ears turned even redder. "And, yes. Before you ask, I am indeed a male. And as you so passionately noted, I am apparently surprisingly well endowed. I buried my face in my hands, letting out a muffled scream of pure agony. "Please. Just call security and have them throw me off the roof. I cannot survive this. I cannot live on this earth anymore." Asher let out a rich, melodic laugh. It was a beautiful sound, completely devoid of malice. He reached across the table, his warm, large hands gently grasping my wrists and pulling them away from my face. "Don't hide," he said softly, his emerald eyes locking onto mine with an intensity that made my breath catch. "You have no idea how long I've waited for someone to look at me the way you did tonight." I blinked, my embarrassment temporarily taking a backseat to my confusion. "What do you mean?" I was faking it half the time. I literally hated reptiles. I only showered you with praise because you kept wiring me $5,000. Asher's lips twitched into a stunning, lopsided smirk. "I know. Do you think I didn't notice the slight tremor in your hands every time you picked me up? Or The way your smile was slightly strained whenever I got too close to your face. You knew? I gasped. Of course I knew, he murmured, his thumb gently brushing against the back of my wrist. But you still tried. Most people, the moment they find out about my family's unique heritage, they run away screaming. Or they try to exploit us. But you, even when you were terrified, you didn't leave me behind at that restaurant. You tucked me against your chest. You kept me warm. He looked down, a soft smile playing on his lips. You bought me a $10,000 luxury terrarium. You ordered me 3 Michelin star Wagyu beef. And he looked back up, his eyes shimmering with emotion. You kissed me. Right on my head. Nobody has ever done that, Sophie. Not in my true form. Wait, I said, my practical brain slowly starting to reassert itself. What exactly are you? A shapeshifter? A demon? A billionaire wizard? Asher chuckled, leaning back in his chair. My family belongs to an ancient clan of serpent spirits. We've existed for thousands of years. In the old days, people worshipped us as gods of wealth and guardians of the earth. In the modern world, well, we found that running global investment firms and real estate empires was a much more efficient way to manage our hoard. A hoard, I repeated, my eyes wide. So you really are stupidly rich. Stupidly, Asher agreed, his eyes twinkling. My personal net worth is somewhere in the 11-figure range. But all the money in the world couldn't buy what I wanted most, someone who would look at my true, scaled form and see something worth loving. Someone who wouldn't just see a monster. He reached into his breast pocket and pulled out a small, velvet-lined box. He slid it across the table toward me. I wanted to test you, yes, Asher admitted softly. But more than that, I wanted to see if we could share a life. If you could accept every part of me. The billionaire, the gamer, and the little black snake who likes to wear top hats. I looked at the box, then back at him. And what's the verdict? I think you passed with flying colors, he whispered. Though I do have one request. What's that? If we are going to share a bed, Asher said, a wicked, playful glint returning to his eyes, you have to promise not to throw me back into the glass tank. And you have to promise to stop reading Google articles about snakes trying to measure you to eat you. I assure you, my appetite is far more refined. My face flushed hot again at his double entendre, but looking at his breathtaking face, and remembering the absolute mountain of wealth waiting for me, I couldn't help but smile. My confident, bag-securing nature fully returned. I reached out and opened the velvet box. Inside lay a flawless, giant emerald ring, cut into the shape of a sleeping, coiled serpent, surrounded by a halo of brilliant diamonds. It was worth more than my entire apartment building. I slipped the ring onto my finger. It fit perfectly. Well, Mr. Asher, I purred, leaning across the table and adjusting his crooked silk bow tie with a cheeky grin. As long as you keep those $5,000 transfers coming, you can sleep wherever you want. But if you shed on my silk sheets, we're going to have a serious talk. Asher's emerald eyes dilated with pure, unadulterated joy. He grabbed my hand, pressing a warm, lingering kiss to my knuckles. Deal, my greedy little savior, he whispered. And as the city lights twinkled around us, I realized that sometimes, swallowing your conscience and praising a reptile was the absolute best career move a girl could ever make.